local authors, Jenn McKinlay, and a new favorite author, Emmeline. Did I get it right?
Emmeline.
Emmeline. You're going to have to correct me throughout the entire program. I'm horrible. Emmeline Duncan, who's traveling from Portland to visit us with her new book. Before we begin, I do want to let those know in the audience that if this is your first time at a Poison Pen event, please feel free to sign up for our e-newsletter. You can do that after the program. That way you'll know who's coming to the bookstore, whether virtually or in person, as well as what new and upcoming books we have available for you. It's real easy to do. Just ask someone at the front. They'll get you signed up. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jenn and Emmeline. Good. My first question for both of you is to tell us a little bit about yourself, or in other words, what is your origin story? We'll start with you.
Origin story, well, I am from Oregon, which is where my books are set. I grew up in a couple different areas of rural Oregon, including on the Oregon coast, where I grew up behind a bookstore. I don't know if any of you have read M.K. Wren. She wrote like Curiosity Kills the Cat. It was the Conan Flag series. I grew up behind the bookstore that she actually used in that series. Oh. And it's a rare bookstore, and I was there all the time because also really nice used bookstore selection. I can proudly say I won my first writing contest in 3rd grade. For a short story. I remember very specifically I talked about the nippy weather in August. So clearly I read a lot, but didn't always know what the words meant. And yeah, and I went to Pacific University in Forest Grove, Oregon, and studied creative writing and political science. Ironically, political science is probably the more useful degree as a writer because world building, political structure, all part of novels, was a huge part of my education. And yeah, since then I've worked a lot of random jobs. I've been a soccer referee. I worked at a medical school, university. I worked in book distribution for a little bit. Worked at a Christmas store. A lot of random things. And that's Paul, if you're hearing him, the shop dog. Maybe he wants me, since I should mention my dog, Waylon, a Great Pyrenees.
I love that you have a Great Pyrenees. Those are the big, white, fluffy ones.
Yeah, the kind of walking clouds.
Yeah. How much weight? Throw weight at me.
Well, so he is actually probably the runt of his litter. He's like hollow. He's very tall, but he's only 80 pounds.
Oh, wow.
But people see him. So weird thing about dogs, people love to guess how much they weigh when they see them. And they're always like, what is he, 110, 120? And I'm like, he's hollow. He's 80.
Wow. Wow. I know, dogs are amazing. We had a standard poodle, and my brother and sister-in-law had a Vizsla, and they were the same weight, but you would lift up the poodle, and it was like lifting air, and the Vizsla was like, oh! So dogs are, anyway, I wish I could be like that. Air. Anyway, I'm Jenn McKinlay, and I'm a recovering librarian, like John. I grew up in libraries. My mom was a librarian. My husband and I met at a library, and I went to college and I studied all the majors. I tried Russian, theater, English, and then after a late night, one night I was sitting in the library and I was like, oh, it's so quiet, and there's books, and I'm at peace. And I was like, I'm going to be a library science major, like Mom. So it's kind of the family business. And while being a librarian, you're surrounded by books. So I knew I'd be inspired all the time because I was an avid reader, had been since I was a kid. And I just rode around being a librarian and a mom, and eventually became a full-time writer.
Okay, my next question for both of you is, what was your initial path to publication like? And we'll start with you, Jenn. I believe your path started in the 3rd grade as a National Enquirer reporter.
So close. My path, like the very beginning, the origin was finding my mom's portable typewriter, and John knows the story. And I used to report on my siblings, and I would charge my mom like 25 cents. So, because I'm a candy freak, and it was a very good system. But those were my first writing chops, and not a nippy August, more like so and so tied up so and then so and so. My mom was like, excellent. But so that was kind of the beginning, and then publication for me, I started writing rom-coms for Harlequin, and I wrote 3 when kind of like the Bridget Jones' Diary era, but they were shorter and smaller, and I wrote a couple of those, and then they essentially fired me without telling me they fired me. It was just kind of like, yeah, you can keep submitting. And so I did. And then finally I caught on that, oh, we broke up. Silly me. And then my husband was the one who said, why don't you try murder mysteries? And by that time, I had been a librarian long enough that I had a pretty good hit list. So it worked.
Well, for me, I had always wanted to be a writer, although it took me a while to really, like after I graduated, to kind of find my voice and what I wanted to write. Got really into young adult for a while, and my debut was actually a young adult thriller that came out from Poison Pen. And then when they were acquired by Sourcebooks, it was re-released as a Sourcebook Fire title. And meanwhile, as I was doing the YA, I had actually signed with my agent for my first mystery for adults. And the very first one that I signed with him with, we went on submission. It didn't sell, which is very normal. But the second project I did sell, and that's Fresh Brewed Murder, which came out a little over a year ago.
Let's talk about your new book. For you, it's Double Shot Death. What can you tell us about that?
Well, so my series is based around a coffee cart and roaster in Portland, Oregon. And so in Double Shot Death, Sage, my main character, has taken their cart on the road. That's the really fun part of using a coffee cart because it's mobile. So as soon as you become the coffee cart of death, you move someplace where they don't know you. And so she's at an eco music festival in the outskirts of Portland that is actually derived off of a real life eco music festival. And, she's the coffee vendor. She's the first one up in the morning. So, of course, she's the one, when she goes out to get things ready, stumbles across the body of a local music manager dead holding one of her coffee cups. And it's a cozy, so she, of course, is going to solve the mystery.
Because that's what you do.
You have to. Who doesn't when you stumble across a dead body? Who isn't like, okay, great, I will now solve this.
Did you ever think that, what would I do if I ran into it? But, in real life, if you ran into a dead body, what would...
I know, so you kind of wonder,
would you feel compelled, or would you just be like 911? Ah!
I kind of was thinking I'd probably call 911 and then freak out the police officers of being like, okay, do you want me to help you secure the scene? They'd be like, what are you talking about?
I took 20 pictures on my phone. I can text them to you, yeah. Every angle.
Exactly. Or call 911 and be giving all the details and they'll be like,
lady, you're suspect number one. What was the question?
Your new book.
Oh, thank you. What were we talking about? Strawberried Alive is the 14th or something in the Cupcake Bakery Mysteries. And it's actually based on a cold case because, at this point I've killed a lot of people. Yeah. So we're having to actually read true crime and get inspired. So there was a case, and I can't remember any of the details because I've written 3 books since then, but it was in California. Remember that? And it was kind of a mistaken identity thing. So I kind of ran with that. I'm not going to say more because then I'll end up giving away my whole book because I'm
And you want people to buy it.
Yeah, surprise. Yeah. I spoiled my own book. But the whole community's involved, and that was kind of fun because we could dig deeper into the old town that's mine, not the real old town. And you get to meet small business owners and, different businesses and fun stuff like that. But for me, it's always an excuse to come up with a really good strawberry cupcake recipe also. And, you're probably a coffee expert now.
In a way. I mean, or just so much research. There's so much knowledge that'll never make it into the books.
I know. Yeah. There's a lot of failed cupcakes.
Well, it was funny, last night, because my first book was beer related, and I was out, and then I'm randomly giving Oregon beer facts. I'm one, I should probably stop, and 2, I have all this knowledge that will always be there, even if it,
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
Your series are marketed by your publishers as cozies. How would you define a cozy?
I think, at its heart, a cozy will always be an amateur sleuth. Will always be also amateur, and always kind of some of the things of minimal violence on the page. No to minimal language, minimal sexual content. And I think, but at its heart, I think a cozy always is someone who's bringing justice and restoring justice and equilibrium back to their community. It's, a small community in some way, whether it's a city or a cupcake shop or a small town. There's always the murder throws everything out of balance, and the character brings the world back into balance for the new normal. And I think at its heart, that's really what a cozy is.
Yeah, what she said, ditto. Except the only other thing I think too with cozies is it's not to compare it to the romance genre, but with a cozy, I think, and you can argue a different point if you have a different point of view, but I think good's going to triumph over evil. And I think for the readers in a world where we don't see that all the time, that's the deal that we have as writers with you. Good's going to triumph. And frankly, in thrillers and noirs, that doesn't always happen.
Yeah. I agree. The happy ending and the sense of justice, and that things going to be good, life is going to be good again.
Yeah,
I think is a key.
There's a pact, and we're keeping it.
Yes.
Unless we don't.
Right. But if it was like a really depressing ending, I think people would be they wouldn't come back to your series. They'd be like, why? I read The Cozy to entertain, not to be depressed at the end. Why would you?
Not to have the dog die, you know.
Yeah.
Like, why would you do that? So why would you do that?
Both of you are writing series, and you have a frame what the publisher calls for the series. In your case, it's coffee. In Jenn's, it's cupcakes. How did you decide upon this particular aspect, and what kinds of research is involved?
I consume a lot of cupcakes. If I was you, I would be like, because I love coffee. I would be like, woo! And I also love cupcakes. For me, it was I don't know if you fell into cozies backward. I didn't know what a cozy was. I was with an agent who kept saying, you need a hook. You need a hook. And I was just like, I have a hook. There's a stripper, and and she's like, that's not, because I was new. So finally, I signed on to do a writer for hire. That Penguin, I think, because we were just badgering them so much. Can I write for you? Can I write for you? Can I write for you? I'm that kid. Can I write for you? Can I, I'm reporting on you. And they were just like, oh my God, if we give her a series, will she go away? So I was writing a writer for hire about decoupage. And shockingly, it was not huge, hugely successful. And I kind of had an inkling when they said, we're going to have you write this decoupage series. You know what decoupage is? Yeah, sure. No, librarian. So I was writing that one, but I was looking, I kind of got, once they handed me what they call the Bible, I was like, oh, that's a hook. So then I had one day where it was just random happenstance. My agent said, whenever I travel, I check out the Cupcake Bakery. And then a friend was getting married, so we spent a whole work shift picking up the cupcakes for her wedding tower. And then my son's godmother called me, and she's like, Sprinkles opened up down the road. They sell shots of frosting. And I was like, cupcakes, death! So it was like, it all just came together.
Well, for me, Pacific Northwest is full of micro roasters and coffee. I have a friend that visited the Northwest from California, and she said she didn't understand it till she went into a block in Seattle, and she's like, which coffee shop should I choose? There's one on every corner, literally. And I also in Portland we have a lot of food cart pods. If you look kind of the history of them, it used to be underused city lots, right? Maybe there's parking in the center, or maybe it was an empty lot that the owner rented out space to food carts, and they put in maybe seating, sometimes covered fire pits. It's a true destination. And I kind of decided I wanted to put those two together. And for a few years ago, there used to be a food cart pod down the street from my house, and I used to have a lab then, and it was his all-time favorite place to go because the coffee cart had treats. And to this day, if I see the owner of that cart, because he still runs it in downtown, he talks about how he would know that I was on my way because he would hear my dog barking from 2 blocks away. So my dog would charge up, put his paws on the counter, and be like, I'm ready. And that summer, I also got to know some of the other food cart owners, and I realized that it was a small community within the city. And I'd read a lot of cozies, and when I sat down to write it, it was very natural for me to write a cozy, considering how much I love them. And then it was a really natural way for me to create a cozy within a city with the food carts. And like I said, I love it because it's mobile. I have a lot of flexibility to move it around Portland if I want. I can also go back to the same space. So yeah, that was kind of where it came from, was a love of coffee, a love of food carts.
Well, you actually had some experience in college working in a coffee shop?
Yeah, I worked on my on-campus coffee shop for a while as a barista. I actually bought my first espresso maker at 14, and I got into espresso early again. Grew up a rainy town on the Oregon coast. Coffee's a really natural thing. I was an exchange student in Finland. They drink the most coffee per capita in the world, so I drank a lot of coffee there. So I would naturally fell into drinking coffee. Yeah, and then I have 14 ways to make it at home. I played around with roasting my own coffee beans, although I generally like buying them out because I like, supporting my local roasters and trying a lot of things.
What exactly is third wave coffee movement?
Well, that's fun, and you can even argue we're in fourth wave just to make it really fun.
Okay,
So second wave was when Starbucks came around, right? And they sort of brought back the craft of more of a stallion style coffee and espresso, and not just, no offense to anyone that loves Folgers, but more of an artisanal coffee and the espresso drinks. And then third wave was the new wave of micro roasters, bringing back pour overs and the small shop. And then the fourth wave is arguably where people know where their beans are coming from, where it's not just free trade, but places that are actually doing contracts with like the farm in Costa Rica or Brazil, and knowing where the beans come from and making sure it's not just a fair wage, but it's a true living wage.
Is it also kind of like a parallel to wine in that you want to know the terroir or whatever they call it?
Yeah, and people that have a really fine palate can tell that difference when they sip. Yeah. And they can tell because I can tell the difference for like Ethiopian and like Costa Rica. Like I can tell that difference.
Wow.
But I'm not. I don't have that fine of a palate. Like I'm not like, oh, this is a bourbon bean and blah blah. Because to me, the Ethiopian is very sweet.
Oh.
Like it's funny. A lot of people think Ethiopian is the best in the world. It's like my least favorite, which is so hipster and snobbish of me. I know. Like I am more of like a Central South American style bean.
Is it more bitter or?
No, to me it's cleaner. Like there's this kind of, to me, cloying sweet aftertaste that I don't like.
That would be me.
But some people love it, and and it's almost like people that like really love coffee like think it's the best, and so
yeah. Now I have to go get both, right? We're both gonna have. John and I are gonna have a taste test now.
Well, and if you go to the right coffee shop, like there's like some places like for me like in Portland, they'll do like tasting flights. Ooh. And so you can try like, and I love one they do in the summer, cold brew flights. They'll do like hot in the winter, and so you can try like 3 side by side, and that's when you start tasting those nuances.
So do you do a flight and then go right like a maniac?
Not usually,
because I would be like, you would think, or is your brain just?
I think this is sort of fun. I have narcolepsy, and so like caffeine doesn't have the same effect to me that it does on other people.
Interesting.
So.
It's tough.
Is it a sedative, or like is it more, or it just doesn't?
It just doesn't.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's fascinating. I did not know that. I'm taking notes back here for a book,
Oh, of course.
Okay. As long as we're cool.
Let's talk a little bit about setting. Emmeline, Emmeline, good. You have written that I wanted to write a book that was set in Portland. So can you talk a little bit about why Portland is so important to you? And then we'll go to Jenn and why she fictionalized Scottsdale.
Well, I definitely, when I read, I love a sense of place in what I read. And I like getting that sense of like immersion where you're in a place that the person like knows really well. And it feels like this story could only happen here because the character is unique and the setting is unique. And I live in Portland and I love Portland. And I love the kind of like the Portlandia jokes, and like, I don't know if you watch TV show Grimm and stuff, and I love seeing the city. And I really wanted to write a book that kind of showed the Portland that I know and love, which is why like the food cart made sense, like coffee made sense.
And your research is right out your door.
Exactly. I can go walk to a really cool coffee shop, and if it's quiet, ask the barista questions. Obviously, will not bother them if they're very busy, because that would be very annoying. And also, a lot of micro roasters, if they're like roasting, if they have time, they're happy to chat with you about what they're doing. Like there's one coffee shop in Portland that used to roast like right in the middle of the store. Very warm place so if it's the middle of the summer, never sit next to it because it's like hotter than it is outside here. But it was really cool to like watch them like roast, and like I said, if they have time, then generally when someone is doing something they love, when you have like general interest in what they're doing, people love talking about it.
True. I found that Scottsdale, there's a lot of cupcake bakeries, and it's been fun to visit them all. And if they have time, same. If they're busy on an order, it's like go move. But if they have time, they're very gracious and nice about. What I like going in and there's I think 21 Cupcakes. I met a reader who was passing through town, and she reached out. And we went for cupcakes, and it was a quiet moment. So the owner started telling us about her worst customers. Just because I was like, I need to like kill off a customer or something. And she was like, oh well. And I was like, so it's like being a librarian. Okay. Scottsdale, I lived here, and it was, same. It was like, it's my neighborhood. I live right down the street. I love Old Town. Lots of cupcake bakeries. I only thought the books would go for like 3. Like I was ready to wrap it up, and I was mercifully wrong. So that was nice. But it does make you do things like, and I know people get mad because there's like a triangle, but it's not really a triangle, So it's like, and then like if you've been reading the cupcake books, you know that these two have been on a path for a very long time, like 12 books before we got where we were going. But I kept thinking, well, if we get there, then the series ends. But come to find out, there's still material, like even when they figure it out. So I don't know, it's fun. And I feel like every time I write a book in this area, I kind of peel back a new layer of the town, because I've lived here for 20 plus years. So it's like, oh, there's another underbelly or another bottom or whatever, So it's nice.
Have you ever gotten something wrong
Oh,
about your setting?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, in the last book, there's a name that's wrong. I've been hearing a lot about that.
So that's your creative license.
Yeah, it's like, oops. There was 2 women with a name that begins with an N, and we mixed one up on one page. I mean, so many people read it. You try, but yeah, it's like, oopsie.
So I try to keep a list of like names to like not replicate the same first letter, just because it's so easy to do that once you're like Nancy and Nora. They sound different. They're so easy to type the wrong way.
Exactly. That's pretty much what happened. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your writing process, because in mysteries, most people think you need to kind of know in advance how it's structured, because you have someone who's murdered, you need to plant clues, you need to create suspects. When you're writing books, do you find that you're very structured like that, or is it more of, I'll start and see where the road takes me?
You can go.
Well, for me, before I start writing, I know who the victim is, and I know where the book starts, and I know why they were killed, and I know the logic behind it, and then I fill in like red herrings and the subplots as I go. Although one thing that I thought was very interesting going from an aspiring writer to published is that now I have to turn a synopsis in ahead of time before I write the book to get editor feedback. And so I have to fill out a lot more than I did before I was published, which did change the way I wrote, since I knew a lot more about what's going on in the middle of the book than I did like when I was aspiring, and which was an interesting change, and also interesting writing during the pandemic, which was, like I can't go to a coffee shop anymore and like get away from my house, which really helps, and so I hadn't realized how much my process was go to a coffee shop, put on headphones to ignore everyone. And I also used to meet up a lot with some local writers that I'm friends with, and it's fun. We'd chat for 15 minutes, put on headphones, and ignore each other, and I really miss that.
Yeah, I know. It's been weird.
Yeah.
And unpleasant in many ways. I am a plotter, and just when I rolled from those little rom-coms to mysteries, I realized I couldn't do it unless I knew everything, So, and also when they gave me that Bible for that first decoupage mystery, I realized what they were looking for, because they handed it to me. It was the setting, it was the characters, it was the plot. It was about 10 pages. So really it's kind of a paragraph per chapter. So it's kind of like the map, so you don't get lost in the woods. So for me, it just became my process to write the 10-page outline, and then the first few mysteries, I would write the 10-page outline so that the publisher would be like, yeah, that sounds great. And then I would completely forget about it. And then I'd be halfway through the book going, oh God, I have to delete the whole thing and start over. So I was like, stick to the outline. But I meet a lot of writers who write by the seat of their pants every day. Like it's a surprise. And I'm like,
it's some really very good writers. And like I heard one who's like, she sit down, she had no idea where it's going to go. And so every day it's like, where's it going next? And I'm amazed.
Yes, that amazes.
Kind of be stressful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think I found a lot of people that are strong plotters do, not that we don't do revision, but it's a different type of revision than if you're a pantser. So I think if people who are writing by the seat of their pants, I think the editing is that much more important, because then they have to figure out like, where did I go wrong? And they have to be willing to go down areas that they might end up completely scrapping and like jumping back.
Yeah, and I love doing that first revision, but I also like that to be my only revision. And I was talking to an author on a Zoom the other day, and I said, how many revisions do you do before you hand it off to your editor? And she was like, 3 or 4. And I was like, ooh, yeah. I can't. No, I would be so tired of it. But for me, I feel like the book is always fresh, because I write it, and that's to me, that first draft is the hardest. And then the revision is kind of the sweet thing, when you're kind of just like, yeah, we're going to go a little longer here. We're going to pull that out. We're going to, and it's fun. Like, it's enjoyable. It's like pulling a couple of weeds in the garden instead of planting the whole thing, So, and then when it comes back, it's still fresh for me, because I haven't read it 6 times already. So I think for plotting, it is a different revision process, and I like it better.
And I think because the mental energy you put into write that initial plot, outline, is the same energy that I think like a pantser is putting in that first couple months of writing, and just where you want to put that time and that thought into the story.
Yeah.
Let's
see if I get it right again, Emmeline. You have said that writing is like weightlifting.
It is. So, I do some Olympic and powerlifting. And if you think about it, if you go out and you're like, I'm going to lift weights one day, and then you don't do it again for 3 months, you don't really make any improvement or gains. But if you're steady and you keep going out and you keep doing it, you slowly make gains. And the fun thing too with weightlifting, you never want to compare yourself to someone else, right? like I was actually laughing once. I did like a weightlifting class, and this guy saw me cleaning up what I had been doing for deadlifts, and he like freaked out, and like he's like taking the weights from me, and I'm like, dude, I just did that, and I wasn't noticing on purpose, but I was deadlifting 30 pounds more than you were. Really, I can put my weights away. It's okay. But, a lot of writing is you don't want to compare yourself to others because no one's journey is the same. And, and you're going to, and with weightlifting, you get in what you put into it, but also you figure out what is realistic for you. And if you're like working full time and you have kids, you're probably not going to write a novel in a month. Maybe you're going to focus on doing like 500 words a day, and that's amazing, right? Because you're consistent and you're doing it. And then maybe people that have more time do like the Stephen King, like 2,000 words a day, but they have the time to do that, and you figure out the program that works for you.
Totally. Agreed. Both of my sons are gym rats, and one of them is very into deadlifts and bodybuilding, and he's very like, if I'm in the gym every day, I'm happy. So I think that's very close to writing. If I'm writing every day, I'm happy.
And it's like that steadiness.
Exactly. It's what you do. Yeah.
Any other words of wisdom, Jen, you want to give to writers or aspiring writers?
She nailed it with every day and consistency, and it's very easy to find excuses not to write. But just you have to. I think, and the thing for me is it becomes a compulsion. Like the story is it always in the back of your head? Mm-hmm. Like no matter what you're doing, the characters are constantly chattering. And when the idea is exciting, they're louder and they're more impatient. And unless you sit down and write, they're just going to badger you. So.
But I would say there are people that have very successful writing careers not writing every day, but they tend to all still be on a schedule. Right? Like I know someone because of her work schedule can't do every day, but she has like a very specific like 4 days a week where she writes intensely, and that works very well for her. But those days where it's a work day, she works. She's not like, but I could do this and that. And like, who doesn't want to go stream Netflix for a couple hours, right? It's fun. But instead of doing that, gets to work.
Discipline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about yourselves as readers. What have you read recently that you'd like to share? What's on your summer reading list?
Well, it's always fun because we were talking about this earlier. I read all the time. I read over 100 books last year, and then I almost always go blank. One thing that I'm getting ready to start is the second Murderbot novella, and I don't know if you guys have heard of Murderbot. It's very fun. It's this kind of like future world, and the Murderbot is kind of this like genderless protection android who has anxiety and just wants to stream soap operas, but instead sometimes has to save people. And so it's really a fun, it's like science fiction stories. I'm looking forward to Death by Bubble Tea coming out in a couple months.
Oh, that's good. I read that
one. I haven't read it yet. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. I really like, this is a little out there if you're a real cozy fan, but I really like Simon R. Green's series. They're, if you take kind of like science fiction and like horror and put it into like a country house murder where everyone could die, but maybe no one does.
Which is a more pleasant outcome.
Right, but it's kind of funny. Maybe it's like a science fiction answer, or maybe it's just people. Like, I love that uncertainty that you never know what you're going to get.
Is that like Schrodinger's cat or something like that?
Yeah, it would be.
Okay.
In novel form.
Yes.
I'm reading all over the place. I just read The Nothing Girl by Jodi Taylor, which came out several years ago, but I'm a huge fan of her Chronicles of St. Mary's, which is a bunch of historians going back in time.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Yeah, they always have a crisis, and it's madness and mayhem, and I love it. She's hilarious. So this was kind of a departure, but it's still a lovely, lovely story. So I finished that one. I read Recently Smiled Beach Murder.
Oh, did you like it?
I really loved it. It's in the Outer Banks in North Carolina. Reporter kind of has to confront the passing of her mother along with a new murder that replicates how her mother died. So really good, really good.
She's
really
scheduled to do an event.
Is she?
Virtual event.
She's delightful.
Yeah,
so Alicia Bissett. And then I'm reading a lot of nonfiction. Like I read You Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Actually, I listened to the audio. That was amazing. Like if you need a motivator, he will motivate you. But a lot of rough language too. And then I just picked up Allow Me to Retort, The Black Man's Guide to the Constitution, which I'm really enjoying because it's, kind of expanding my whole knowledge base on law and the Constitution and all that. And then I'm trying to think if I've read anything else lately. last year I read so many juvenile mysteries for the Edgar. It's like I'm just getting my writing back.
So if someone has kids of that age and they want to get them hooked on mysteries, who would you recommend?
It depends. If you have a trained kid, I would totally read Kidnap on the California Comet. That was one of the Edgar nominees. And the authors are delightful. It's very British. But that one happens to be set in the United States. That was fun. Concealed is for a little bit older, and that was the Edgar winner, and it was fantastic. These are all middle grade. And it was... oh my God, I know her name. So I can know. Oh, Cristina Diaz-Gonzalez. I'm like, I can remember Diaz and Gonzalez. What was her first name? Well, but so that was terrific too. But what I really love is there's a lot of historical juvenile.
Yeah.
Like Jennifer Nielsen had one that's a World War II, and then Bunce has the Myrtle series, which is really good. And they're all kind of like they take the one that Canada. It's Agatha Christie as a young girl.
Oh, that's right. I can see the cover and I can't picture the author's name.
No, me neither.
It's green.
It's Aggie Martin and the Dead Man in the Garden.
Yeah.
It was terrific.
And her friend is thinly veiled Poirot.
He's a very thinly veiled Poirot, but it's like if Agatha Christie was a little girl. It's terrific. It's terrific.
On the middle grade mystery side, I really love 3 Times Lucky. I cannot remember the author's name. It's the voice in it is amazing.
I would feel bad.
Because it's like a girl who thinks she was like found like big floating down a river, and she like lives with the general and like this woman, and they have like a cafe, and it's a really fun book. And a Green Glass House, which is like an inn. And they're both like incredibly. I'm not doing the best job explaining them, but they're really great middle grade mysteries.
Yeah, there's just a lot out there. That was one thing. I don't write in juvenile, so it was so great but I was a children's librarian for a while, so it was just like, oh, I'm back, and it's just nice to know that kids have amazing books out there. Like there's a lot out there.
And Sir Fig Newton and the Persistence of Science just came out. It's actually a friend of mine, but it's a really lovely book about a girl her cat is like acting kind of off, and she has to do research and figures out her cat has diabetes, but her family can't necessarily afford the treatment, so she has to come up with a way to fundraise to treat her cat. And so I joke it's kind of a crime novel, right? Because she's there, she has to investigate the problem and get justice, for her cat.
Definitely. Problem solving at the very least.
Exactly.
Emmeline,
yes.
Do you have any thoughts about going back to young adult?
Well, I do have a young adult mystery on submission, and maybe it sells, maybe it doesn't. And if it doesn't, that's okay. I have other stuff I also want to write. And it's interesting because once you send the book out on sub, it's out of your hands. And so we'll see what happens. But I do love young adult mysteries, so maybe I do, but maybe I continue writing for adults. I have a couple different ideas I'm working on, so I'd be happy going either way.
Mm-hmm.
I know lots of people are interested about your author's presence on social media. Do you have favorite platforms? Do you have a love-hate relationship with it? Talk about social media.
I hate it. No, that's not true. I like Instagram. I feel like it's the more positive of all the platforms. People don't have a lot of time to go completely bananas, or at least I haven't seen that. I'm exhausted by Facebook. I'm tired of that. Like my page just got cloned, and I just feel I'm just so tired of that. So
what does that mean?
They basically took my information and my profile picture, and then they cloned it. But instead of it being Jenn McKinlay, it's Jenn McKinlay raffle. And then they started reaching out to people like, "You want a raffle?
So
Give us your credit card number."
Okay.
Yeah, and it was just like, and it's just tiresome. And I'm sure they do it on Instagram too, but it hasn't happened to me there. So, and plus it's pictures, and it's people's highlight reels, so they don't really have time to go into their political rants or their, what I mean? It's just like Instagram is like, here's my dog, here's my dinner, It's like, here's us in Tahiti. Hey, see dog. See, he likes Instagram too.
Paul's like, please Instagram me.
Yeah, he's total bait. He's Instagram. He's what do they call it? Thirster.
Yeah, he'd be like a thirst trap, like the doggy thirst trap.
So I prefer Instagram. Facebook I find tedious, and then Twitter is just, ridiculous, which I'm on, and I yell at people, but it's stupid.
I'm also a huge Instagram fan. I love pictures of books. Who doesn't like to look at pictures of books and pictures of dogs, right? And cool scenery. And so that's probably of the platforms I engage in, that's my favorite of the main. I do have a Facebook page, but I'm kind of the same, kind of over Facebook. And I think too, like a lot of the stuff that's happened politically over the last few years turned Facebook into a weird political element that makes it a lot more fun to engage in. And then same thing, like Twitter is sort of bizarre. Although I do like Twitter when you like follow the right people, because I mean I like some sports and it's fun seeing people's like. I like sometimes people are incredibly witty on Twitter, which I adore seeing.
Yes, there's humor on Twitter that you cannot find anywhere else.
Right, and then I also like Discord. I actually am in a Discord book club that reads like the club reads like multiple books a month. There's actually someone that I met actually through that book club in this audience right now, and that's.
I have no idea what that is. I'm like born in the 1920s, so tell me.
Well, Discord is yet another social media platform that really took off with video. People do like with video games, and so you can go on, but it's not just video games. There's a lot of other stuff on there as well. But I originally started using Discord if I was like stuck in a video game to figure. So I play, but I'm really terrible. I'm like, my characters die. I'm like incredibly bad. I just look for games where you can't die. There are a few, like the Fables game. You just work your way through the world. Like, like I've been like playing Witcher 3 and I keep dying. Like my horse died. Like keep having to restart. I'm terrible. But you go to figure out like why do I keep getting stuck? And you could find clues like on Discord. And I know there's it's actually a Balticon. They started like a cool Discord channel that goes on like with their conference where there's like after parties where you can go and chat with the people that were on the panels. And it's weird. It almost feels to me like kind of like old school internet and new. And there's also like voice channels and stuff like that. But for the book club, it's fun because they'll choose books and then the group will read and people will write their comments, and you can like put little spoiler tags on them so you have to like click to read what they're saying. And it was really funny because like someone that read like Fresh Fruit Murder and they spoiler like the coffee drink they like, and I'm like, that's hilarious. It made me very happy.
That's funny.
Should we open up to questions from the audience?
Sure. What you got?
What was the book we talked about on the Outer Banks?
Smile Beach Murder.
Smile?
Beach. It's
Murder.
Smile Beach is the location, and Murder. Smile Beach Murder. It's Alicia Bissett.
I think is it a debut? Maybe
She
not.
wrote
she
a
wrote for
novel
young
years ago,
adult.
but not a mystery.
Okay.
So it is her debut mystery. But
So what do you have coming next, both of you?
oh, that's always a good question.
Well, after Double Shot Death, the third book in my series comes out next spring, and that will be Flat White Fatality.
Oh.
I like a good flat white. I have an e-novella coming out next month called The Attraction Distraction, and it's weirdly I wrote it because I got obsessed with Madeline Miller last year, and I read Song of Achilles and Circe, and it just blew the top of my head off. I mean, my poor husband, I would just fall around going, oh my God, these are the best thing I've ever read. I mean, I don't even know how to describe it, but anyway, so she made me obsessed with. John had to hear about it. Poor man. But Greece and ancient Greece and all the stuff. So it's kind of if anybody's seen the movie The Lost City with Sandra Bullock and Channing
which
Tatum.
is this generation's version
out.
of Romancing the Stone.
Exactly, Romancing the Stone for this year or whatever. Weirdly, the novella is a lot like that. They have to, a scholar who is in the Museum of Literature in New York has to go to an island in the Aegean Sea and find an artifact, and she ends up with a former, and so it's an enemies to lovers, second chances, almost dying in an earthquake kind of fun thing. Yeah, super fun. So that's next month, and it's just an e-novella.
Let's make sure people know that it's just digital, so don't
and
bug
it's
us
just an ebook.
we don't
talk
have
to
it
the
in
boys
print
pen.
right now.
I'm writing 3 novellas, and then next year when they come out in print,
Then will happen.
Yeah. And then after that, I have The Plot and the Pendulum, which is the next Library Lovers mystery. And then in January, I have Fatal Fascinator, which is the next Hat Shop. It's been 3 years since we did one of those, so we're going back. That's done. I'm like, I had to think about it. I'm like, I wrote that, right? Yeah, I did that.
I did just dream it.
And then we're shaking things up. I would normally have a Cupcake Bakery in the spring of 23, but we've decided to write a Christmas one.
Really?
So we're going to bump Cupcake from its annual spot of April, May, and move it to like September, October, which of course booted the next library because I have, so next year is Fatal Fascinator, and then Summer Reading, my next women's fiction, which is set on Martha's Vineyard, and it's a dyslexic heroine and a hot librarian guy. And then after Summer Reading will come the Christmas Cupcake, which I don't have a title for. So if anybody has a good idea for cupcakes and Christmas, because I know sales and marketing is going to be like, it needs to have cupcakes and it needs to have Christmas, and I can't think of anything. Because Joanne Fluke already stole like Christmas Cupcake murder.
Yeah, she's pretty much cornered the market.
But yeah, so that's, I have a lot. But anyway, call John. Hi, Debbie.
When does the pendulum come out?
September, I think.
Is it September? It's September or October. She knows. Jill knows. Jill's got a book.
I think it's
October 11th.
yeah.
October 11th.
You can pre-order this early?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Mhm.
We just got the cover and it's super cool. I
Yeah,
will
that's
say,
actually
I
it's
love the
if you
cover.
love an author, it's better to order early because with publishing being so crazy, you want to be sure you get the book. And if you wait to the last minute, you might not.
Yeah, I don't know if this has hit you, Emmeline, but my editor reached out a while ago, and what he's saying is straight up. I had my deadlines because you can see I'm kind of I have a schedule, and because of the paper and ink and printers, we've lost a lot of printers during the pandemic. She's like, "Do you mind rolling all your deadlines closer to you by 3 months?" And I was just like, "No, not at all." But that was before. And I just was like, why? And she said, well, we need to get the copy edited versions to the printer. We got to get you in the printing queue because there's a lack of printers. So a lot of authors that you love that are favorites, even the reprints, they have to schedule in the reprints. So it's like they need a running start. So I don't know if they've hit you with that yet, but
I have not been.
be ready.
Is there lack of people doing the printing, or is there lack of the machine?
Printers. I think with the pandemic, yeah, a lot of printers closed.
Oh.
I know.
And then also, if you think about the different supplies that go into printing a book, right? Because it's paper, it's materials for the covers, it's the ink. It's maybe multiple inks. And so when the supply chain gets disrupted, you have to get all those to the same place at the same time. So I've heard about like, oh, we have paper, but we don't have the inks. Or, oh, we have the inks are ready, but not like these other supplies. And the glues, for the bindings. And so that, I think, has been incredibly difficult. And then you also add in a lot of some of the printers have closed. So it's just made it a challenge. And then and then I know someone, her book was actually printed like overseas, and then it was stuck on a boat
In a crate
for
in
6
Long
months.
Beach,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. So order early, order a lot.
Order extra.
And I think it's really amazing having a list, because I play life a little bit more a little loose, and it's more of a surprise because sometimes I'll forget I pre-ordered, and then they'll get 3 copies from like 3 different bookstores, and they'll call pick up your book, and I'm like, oh yeah.
Gifts.
Now I'm doing
Christmas gifts.
giveaways.
Exactly. That's half my Christmas is like, or
Done.
Any other questions?
How do you keep track of all these characters for all your books? If you got running books.
I think I'm fortunate that I try to make them all very different. So it's like the librarian is a little bit more serious, and then the American in the London Hat Shop series is younger, flirtier, and then the Cupcake Bakery is, I always think of all of my work is kind of I Love Lucy meets Agatha Christie, but levels. Like, so probably the Cupcake Bakery is the most ridiculous. That's the grape stomping I Love Lucy. Yeah, total chocolate factory, much, yeah, even that. So I think I make them different enough. I mean, I've had a few moments where like suddenly the name Mel will pop into a library mystery, and then my copy editor will be like, So there's little boo-boos, but mostly I try to keep. And I don't know about you, but I try to write one whole book, and like I never try to write 2 books at the same time for that reason, because I would think I would lose my way. I would get lost in the weeds.
And I think to a story Bible where you keep track of, introduce a character, and if you make notes in a second document of like their height, right, or anything unique about them, a lot of times I'll just copy and paste their description and put it into a file, and then so later if I'm like writing the next book, I'm like, wait, how did I introduce the character before? Go back, read the summary. And anytime I introduce something, try to remember at least, anytime I introduce something new about a character, to like add that to the file.
Yeah, I think that's smart. We were talking earlier about Malice Domestic, which is a conference, and I've only gone once, and I went to meet Elizabeth Peters, because, she was mine. And she was doing an interview at that Malice, and someone said, and she called out people, she's like, yeah, Amelia was this height in one book and this height in another book. And I thought that's so prior to like, word processing and computers having that file. But it made me feel pretty good about myself. I'm like, good, because I can never remember their eye color, and you think you would. But I will write a character and then be like, what do they look like? And I have like no idea. It's, you just.
And sometimes, I mean, not always, the copy editor will kind of sometimes create this document when they copy edit the book, and they list like the characters who are introduced in their names, and sometimes they'll even summarize that info. And so then it's really fun. I'm like, sweet, copy it, paste it into that same like folder, and like, I'm like, thank you for doing that work for me.
Totally.
When you're writing a story, you have if you're thinking about a series, and so do you have a whole bunch of different ideas going on, and then you hone in on one and say this is going to be this book, and then it leads into this book and so on down the line, or do you have a bunch of different ideas and then you go, oh, that's really cool, and you take that out, and then that'll be in the next book?
You think more than I do. I'm like, I'm happy if I can squeeze out one plot. I think in most series, because you have, like for me, I have an ensemble cast. So let's talk about Cupcake because that's the book. So it's Mel and Angie and Tate and Joe and the Delora brothers and Marty and all the laugh track characters. So for me there's an overlying story of the family and the friends and the bakery and the business, and then the individual stories are the murders. So it's like every time I go into the world, I kind of have to pick up the threads of like, okay, who is pregnant? Who's having a baby? Oh, that one's having a baby. Okay, well, how are we going to work that in? And so that's kind of the tapestry thread that's the long one, and then the shorter ones are just like the murder mystery. So it's like, oh, mostly I focus on figuring out the mystery, and then I go back and pick up the threads of their lives, where they are and what's going on. Does that make sense? Okay.
I kind of look at ideas of like, oh, it'd be cool to have like a murder like here, right? Because I mean, it's like an obvious one that I don't have any plans for coffee would be like at like the Northwest Barista Championships, and then or like a major side character in my books is like as a video game developer, I'm like, oh, it'd be fun to have like Comic-Con. Right, just because people will be so interesting to play around with like that world, and so I like have notes of like where I could set books, and then figure out like where the next one should be for some like a logical progression of the story that I see. It's all very just like kind of like exists in my brain and kind of plops out in weird words. But
we don't have any other. One more question.
What do you feel about crafting clues and red herrings? How do you do that?
Is that kind of like, is it intentional? I think they can be pretty organic. I think for me, having written so many, the things I've come to understand when I'm crafting the mystery is like my red herrings are really tied to my suspect list. So as I'm working out the plot, it's like I know, say we have an average of 5 suspects, to really keep the reader and the puzzle going. The red herrings will then be tied to those suspects because I know which suspect is so then I kind of figure out how to plant red herrings as I introduce those suspects.
Well, I think too, like once you figure out the victim and you figure out why are they in strife with multiple people in the community they're in, like why would like 5 different people have a reason to kill them, right? And then once you figure that out, and then you work your red herrings based off why would someone logically be in conflict. And then you work that onto the page, even though you know eventually who actually did it. And then if their victim feels like a real person that you can sort of see their life for good and for bad, like the red herrings flow, I think, easier. If it was like a really cardboard cutout like villain that dies, it would probably be actually harder to write a red herring because like, oh, everyone hated him, yeah, whatever. But if it's like, like they're a complicated person that it makes it like a more interesting.
And I like it too when you have a victim that you can't find out who hated them. Like that's when it's fun too to write a mystery where it's like that was. And I don't write many like beloved victims. I really try to kill people who deserve it. Therapy. But I find it interesting when you have a victim that's like, well, but why? But they were, and then you have to really like backtrack and figure it out. So
I think so far, at least with the first 3 in the series, I tried to make a very complicated victim. They're not all good. They're not bad. Right. I mean, they've maybe done some things that are real or that aren't good, but there's a lot to them. So there's a lot of facets of their personality to explore while solving the case. That would be fun to write a character that was like totally Pollyanna.
Yeah.
It'd be like, did someone kill her because she was too nice?
Could be. No, I think I like it when you have to deep dive to find the facets.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a good ending point for our discussion. I want to thank Emmeline and Jenn for being with us, For those in the audience who came today and those tuning in over the internet, this has been another virtual and real-life author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore. If you give us a few minutes, we'll get the authors set up. They'd be happy to sign books. We've got more copies up front, and there are some refreshments towards the back. So thank you, Jenn and Emmeline.
Thank you for having us.
This is when we swear and it goes live, right?
Yeah. It'll be all the rage of TikTok.
Ooh, we could go viral.